Good morning, and welcome back to the show. It's a beautiful fall day here in South Carolina, and this episode of the show is all about my Ironhead again, and fixing a problem that I was convinced was a carburetor issue and turned out to be something completely different. I'm a little embarrassed it took me so long to figure this out, but if your bike is having a similar problem to this one, and this one was popping back through the carburetor, watch this. Maybe you can learn something. It can help you fix your bike, or maybe you can just laugh at me and how long it took me to figure this out. And before we can get into the meat and potatoes of this episode, I have a little housekeeping video. If you are a returning viewer or a subscriber, thank you. You probably will have noticed that I have renamed this channel. Previously, this channel was Paul's Speed Shop, and now it's Butt Crack Cycles. It sounds a little funny, and it's meant to. Several years ago, I started an Instagram page, and it was called Butt Crack Pizza. Kenneth, my son, was about 3 at the time, and he just said that one day, and I thought it was hilarious. I thought it would make for a really funny username, so I named my Instagram account that. And that Instagram page, along with Paul's Speed Shop YouTube channel, were places where I was putting up content about my project cars. And I have sort of gotten away from project cars and into motorcycles, specifically old Harleys. They take up a lot less space. I enjoy working on them a lot more. I love riding them more than I ever have loved driving any car. And I could see myself doing this for a long time. In fact, if you followed along with my Evo Sportster chopper build, you'll know that I bought that bike with the intent to build it and then raffle it off or just outright sell it. And I opened a second LLC for doing that. And I named it Butt Crack Cycles. People on social media already knew me as the Butt Crack guy, so I just went with it. I think it's going to make for some cool artwork. I've actually got some artwork for some t-shirts in the pipeline right now. Almost done. And I just wanted to rebrand everything. So you can find me now on Instagram at Butt Crack Cycles. Still here on YouTube, hopefully doing 1 to 3 Harley videos a week. And in real life, if you make it to South Carolina, I'd love to go ride with you or piddle around on, work on a old bike with you. So that's it. Thanks for watching, and thanks for sticking with me through some changes. Thanks for watching that intro and making it to the actual video. Alright, rewind to about a month ago. This bike left me in the side of the road, and it had 2 problems going on when it did this. The first was a float issue. The float was set too low. I'm still not entirely sure how this happened because I'd been riding this bike for several hundred miles after a carburetor rebuild with no issues. But I reset the float height and got the motorcycle running again. And the other problem was the generator wasn't charging. I found some burn up wiring inside of it and replaced the generator. So after getting the motorcycle running again, I decided I was going to do a video about daily riding an Ironhead Sportster. Can you use one of these as a reliable commuter now in 2022, almost 2023, when the youngest of these bikes is a 1985? And I made it a total of 48 miles before the bike broke down on me again. And when it broke down this last time, it started with, it would run fine, but would pop through the intake when it was cold, or when you gave it some throttle. Almost like an accelerator pump issue with the giving it some throttle. And that brings us up to where we're at now. So as a test, I stole the Amazon Chinese knockoff S&S Super E off of Chris's 76 and put it on this bike. And then tried to get this thing running.
But the fucking accelerator pump doesn't actually squirt, it just like fucking dribbles fuel out on the wall. Watch. I kind of think that should be up a little higher so it can shoot down the throat of the carburetor, but it's like whacking right there. You see it?
Do it again.
Yeah. Just fucking dribbling fuel down the throat. That might be enough that it'll
pop off and go. And here's what I was talking about with this carburetor. It doesn't actually shoot a good stream of fuel down the throat. It just kind of dribbles out. Oh.
It's an Amazon flamethrower.
Yeah, it is an Amazon flamethrower. At this point in time, I was thinking that this carburetor was kind of just a piece of shit, and that's why it was backfiring through the carb, like my K-Hen was. But after playing around with it, I got it running kind of sort of good enough that I felt like, hey, maybe I'm actually onto something here. At this point in time, I was hopeful. I thought maybe, it really wasn't the carburetor, so I took it out to the field for a couple of laps. And if it isn't obvious, it was still spitting and popping back through the carburetor. I had to really ride the clutch to get it to go anywhere. Chris was jealous of me doing dirt bike Sportster thing, so he wanted to do dirt bike electric glide thing, so I rode bitch with the beer, and we went and rode around the field for a little bit and listened to Sammy Kershaw, the one CD that's stuck in his radio and he can't get it out. And after that, we went home for the day, and that evening I couldn't sleep, so I messed with the carburetor a little more, though didn't really find anything. And the next morning, I came in a little early and pulled the Amazon S&S knockoff off of my bike and stuck the K-Hen butterfly carb back on. And then I tried to start the bike up again, hoping that maybe magically I had fixed what, at this point in time, I still thought was probably a carburetor issue. Don't sound good at all. Dude, I think something's fucked up inside the bike. I've got a fucking timing issue or valve train. I don't know, it doesn't make sense. The valves don't seem super duper clattery or whatever. Later on in the day, I checked the valves and they all needed a slight adjustment, but nobody was off so badly that it was alarming. And then I went into timing and I pulled the points cover off and finally pulled the electronic ignition plate out. And yeah, there we go. My timing cup just spins around on the camshaft. That's my problem. You can see right there the little tit on the back is broken off. So I walked back to Chris's Sportster and robbed his. Because, let's face it, he's not needing it anytime soon at the rate he's going on this project. I could probably break another one before he needs one. And with my newly scavenged part in hand, I set out for assured victory. is it. She's gonna run perfect.
Hooray!
Hooray! We did it.
I should have done that last week.
No shit. I'm fucking losing sleep and stressing out over this too. Before I pulled my timing plate off to look at the Hall effect sensor, I marked it in multiple locations and then put it back with all the marks lined up. So I was pretty confident that my timing was at least close enough and the bike sounded good, but I did want to double check it with a timing light. And I'm not going to go into too much detail about how to do this. The shop manual tells you how to do it, and this is very similar to timing anything else. And it was time for a test drive. So I'm back at the shop, and this thing runs great. I just finished riding it around. I didn't go far or very long. I've got some work to get done, but I'm gonna ride it around later today. This thing so far is running great. I'm super happy with it. And I am still waiting on that CV carburetor I had ordered. At the end of my last video, I talked about how I was going to put a CV carb on the Evo Sportster, and as a test I was going to put it on this one. I ended up just substituting Chris's Amazon S&S knockoff as a substitute carb because it's been like 2.5 weeks, closing in on 3 weeks since I ordered that CV carb, and it still hasn't shown up. So the reason I have been struggling so hard and working so hard to get this bike running is because today is Friday, October the 7th, and tomorrow, Saturday, October the 8th, is the Congregation Show up in Charlotte, which is only about 30 miles from me, maybe not even that far. And I really want to go, and I'm going to go. Chris is going to come with me. Our buddy Bernard's going to ride up there, so they'll be on their geezer glides, and I'll be the only guy in our trio on a cool old bike. So, you guys suck. And yeah, I'm really psyched about that show. I can't wait to see those bikes. I'd like to meet some people, you know, put some names with some faces. A lot of those guys I follow on Instagram and like kind of, you know, look up to and admire that are building these custom choppers and bobbers and custom bikes and old school vintage Harleys. All stuff that one day I want to do. Like, I'd love to have a bike in that show. It's a pretty big show for this area. So I'm just psyched that I actually get to ride this tomorrow instead of riding my Honda. Not that I dislike my Honda, I like my Honda, but man, it sure is going to be nice to show up to a Harley show on a Harley. So that's it for this episode. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing, likes, comments, everything. I hope you learned something. I'm going to start this over with the prop. Never mind, I couldn't find a prop. I think I actually already threw out my little timing cup, but long story short, it bolts to the camshaft and it spins around, and if this is the cup and this is your Hall sensor, this is just a magnetic pickup, and as that cup goes through it, it's solid, and then it has a little gap, and when that air gap comes through, the Hall effect sensor, the magnetic field, is broken, and it says fire the spark plugs, and gives the signal to the coil to fire the spark plugs. These years, electronic ignition are waste spark, which means, I think in Harley land they call it dual fire, where it's always firing the spark plugs. So while the front cylinder is on the power stroke and it needs the ignition, it's being fired, and the back cylinder is on the exhaust stroke, and its cylinder, or its spark plug rather, is also being fired, and that wasted spark just gets pushed out the tailpipe with the rest of the exhaust gases. And that's why, with that cup having come unbolted from the camshaft, because that little tit that fits in the keyway on the cam snout was broken, sometimes apparently it would catch, and it would catch enough to fire, but it wasn't firing at the right time and shooting flames through the intake and stuff. Looks cool, probably not so good for your engine. I hope you learned something watching this, or at the very least, like I said earlier, I hope you were entertained by how long it took me to figure out something so dumb and stupid and little. I will say, this probably happens to everyone, and it definitely happened to me on this episode. When you have lots of problems over and over again with the same thing, and my issue, I had been having carburetor problems. When that bike left me on the side of the road, it really was a carburetor problem. And you just get it in your head, and so then you go down that path. But remember, take a step back, breathe, think it through. You will figure this out. If I can do it, you can do it. I'm going to congregation tomorrow, and that'll be a cool video.